All right, gang. Speaking of Big Brother 1984, total totalitarian control from a oligarchy of some such nature, did you know that now the word preference is offensive, especially when it is used in relation to sexual orientation? That preference is now, in fact, rather like the N-word when it comes to LGBTQIA 2+ issues. Did you know that? Did you know that? And if you're kind of scratching your head and wondering, I don't remember that happening, and you go to the dictionary, like your Merriam Webster dictionary, or probably, you go online to the Merriam Dictionary's website, you will actually find that the definition has changed. That Merriam-Webster has changed the definition of preference to include that it is an offensive term when used in regards to LGBTQIA 2+ XYZ persons and issues. Now, curiously enough, gang, the Merriam-Webster dictionary changed the definition of the word preference on the same day when Supreme Court nominee Coney Barrett was grilled for her using that word by people on the left, people on the Senate Judiciary Committee. This is actually what happened, okay? Senator Mazie Hirono said to Judge Barrett, "Let me make clear, sexual preference is an offensive and outdated term. It is used by anti-LGBTQ activists to suggest that sexual orientation is a choice. It is not. Sexual orientation is a key part of a person's identity. If it is your view that sexual orientation is merely a preference, as you noted, then the LGBTQ community should be rightly concerned whether you would uphold their constitutional right to marry." She also said, this is actually from CNS News, Hirono also opined that she did not think it was an accident that Barrett used the term. So, of course, Barrett, apologized profusely if she had given offense, saying, absolutely not, that is not what I meant to do. Barrett said, "I certainly didn't mean, and would never mean to use a term that would cause any offense to the LGBT community. So if I did, I greatly apologize for that. I simply meant to be referring to Obergefell's holding with respect to same-sex marriage." Now, Hirono and Cory Booker's attack against Judge Barrett because she used the word preference when it came to LGBTQIA 2+ XYZ issues caused an avalanche of people to opine on that. A word that had absolutely no derogatory meaning whatsoever a week ago all of a sudden became the N-word. Lambda Legal said, "This is a dog whistle. The term sexual preference is used by opponents of equality to suggest that being LGBTQ is a choice." The Gay and Lesbian Alliance Against Defamation, GLAAD, said the correct term is sexual orientation. MSNBC producer Kyle Griffin said sexual preference, a term used by Justice Barrett, is offensive and outdated. The term implies sexuality is a choice. It is not. News organizations should not repeat Justice Barrett's words without providing that important context. Now, the hilarious thing about this whole thing is that people on the left have been using sexual preference as a synonym for sexual orientation themselves. In fact, one of those people was Joe Biden. He's done it, in fact, at least twice this year on the campaign trail. Again, quoting from CNS News. In May, Biden said during a virtual roundtable with African Americans, quote, "I'm going to need you to help this time rebuild the backbone of this country, the middle class, but this time bring everybody along regardless of color, sexual preference, their backgrounds," unquote. The following month, speaking to African American community leaders at a church in Wilmington, Delaware, Biden said, quote, "It is a little bit like when I came out and said I did not think we should discriminate against people based on their sexual preference." Even better, even better, gang, get this. This is a story from just this year, actually, in fact, too. March 2nd, 2020, from Slate. Now, if you know anything about Slate, and we've talked about Slate, Slate stories that have run on Slate a couple of times here on the channel and on the Rolling Stone, you know that it is the farthest thing from a right-wing website, news site, or anything. I think that if you suggested to anyone who works there that you thought that it was conservative or that it gave off conservative vibes, I think everyone associated with Slate would do something drastic. They would have to immediately seek psychological help. Some of them might jump off from the top of buildings, stand in front of buses like Bill Murray does in Groundhog's Day. I mean, that is how horrified they would be that you would actually have mistaken them, their website, their work for a conservative. But this year, this March again, March 2nd, 2020, in their How to Do It section, which is Slate's sex advice column, okay? Which, if you want to look it up, the headline is, "My boyfriend wants to send me video clips to show me what to do in bed," okay? If you read on down that story, because these things, it's kind of like Dear Abby. Every edition of Dear Abby, it's not just one letter, one answer. It's a couple of letters, at least two, sometimes three. Well, if you get towards the bottom, okay, Dear How to Do It, you find this very interesting letter, which says, "Dear How to Do It, I am a 65-year-old man, reasonably attractive, blah, 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 blah. I have been in a sexual drought for about 37 years. I am writing to say that lately I have been thinking I might be bi, or at least bi-curious. I sometimes fantasize about sexual adventures with men. I've even thought of sexual activities with a trans man, the best of both worlds, perhaps." And he signed himself "By golly, ha ha ha, B-I. These people think that they are being so clever." Listen now, though, to what Slate said in response to this guy writing in saying, "I might be bisexual. Dear by golly, you know way better than I what proclivities you had going into your sexual drought. Is it possible that an absence of women prompts heterosexual identified men to dabble with other guys? Certainly, that could be what's happening with you, sure. But many people sit somewhere in the middle of a spectrum of sexuality and aren't confined to the absolute poles. It could be that you have always had it in you to be interested in men and you hadn't bothered to seriously consider it until now. You also may have come to this conclusion regardless of how active you are. Some people keep evolving sexually, finding different things they're into at different times. In an episode of Netflix's Sex Explained, fantasies are compared to languages. Research suggests we don't unlearn old ones, but we can learn new ones. Dr. Justin Lee Miller, who has studied fantasies extensively, suggests that one way of picking up new sexual interests could be exposure, via porn, for example, to something novel when on the brink of orgasm. For many, that's when the disgust response is reduced. The ensuing orgasm could prompt the stimulus to be sought again, and a new fantasy kink is born. So, in other words, you have sexual preferences. That is basically what Slate just said this year in March to a guy writing in saying, "Hey, I might be bisexual." They said people keep evolving sexually. That means you continue to have more preferences. Hey, I like this. No, I don't like this. That's it. That's it. That is exactly what Slate has said. And it continued. Whether that response comes as a result of circumstances or if the images just confirm something innate is an open question. So they're leaving it open that, hey, you might actually be evolving, buddy. You might actually be getting different preferences. And in fact, as other people pointed out, saying that sexual preference is offensive, doesn't that sort of erase the quote-unquote lived experience in the jargon of the left of bisexual people who are attracted to men and women but might prefer one to the other, or one might prefer one to the other, etc., 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 etc. Now, all of this is to say that of course, this is a huge red herring. The attacks against Judge Barrett based on this word are phantoms. They're ghosts. There's nothing to it because the left itself has used that word in that context with LGBTQIA 2 plus XYZ issues. They simply went after her when she used it because they saw it as an opening. They saw it as an opening to get her, to link her with, the great sin of our age, homophobia, because as you know, she is she leans towards traditional Catholicism. She is a traditional Catholic, much more than many Catholics in the United States today, as a matter of fact. That's what this was. But the really scary thing, and this goes back to one of my pet topics here on the channel with language. It only took one day. It took Senator Hirono and Senator Booker not even questioning Judge Barrett about her use of the term preference, but outright condemning her. It took them, and then everyone else on the left followed suit. GLAAD, Lambda Legal, all the talking heads on the left, the think pieces came out saying sexual preference is a horrible word. It's a dog whistle, like Lambda Legal said. And then Merriam Webster changed the dictionary. Reality changed. The left changed reality. Again, I'll repeat. A month ago, sexual preference, no big deal. It was a synonym for sexual orientation. When they attacked Judge Barrett, they changed reality. They made preference a dirty word. They made it, again, I will repeat this, the equivalent of the N-word when it deals with LGBTQ people. And Merriam Webster, which as a dictionary is supposed to be charged with the defense and the preservation of language and words and meaning, changed the meaning of that word in order to stay relevant and in order to stay on quote unquote the right side of history. This is where we are. When the right people in our cultural and political oligarchy make an impromptu decision. This word is now bad. You can't say that. Oh, this is now offensive. Oh, that is now outdated. Then the powers that be, the rest of our institutions, the rest of our culture, immediately fall into line. Merriam Webster didn't even have to gather an emergency meeting and then 3 days later say, you know what, in light of everything, we're going to update the definition of the word preference. No, it happened the exact same day. After this all went down, Merriam Webster changed the dictionary. If you go to their website right now, they are, in a sense, essentially gaslighting you because they are saying that the word preference has always been derogatory and offensive when used to describe sexual orientation or LGBTQIA 2 plus XYZ issues. That's what's happening. All of the institutions in our society today, they are designed now to lie to us. That is their goal. They are designed to lie to us, and they continue to promote lies to further their own ideological agendas and the ideological agendas of the people who run and control our society. That is the point of where we are today. And unfortunately, there is no political solution to that. There is absolutely no political solution to that at all. That can only be fought on the level of language and on the level of culture and art, which is why we really need to open up a beachhead on those fronts. That is story number 2.